Blessings and greetings. Greetings and blessings, blessed souls. We're alive because we are meriting to stay alive in this most existential of moments, with the intent of being configured toward Chaim, instructions of life, toward Chesed, toward the kindness, toward Rachmim, instructions of mercy. This presentation is aimed at particularly my response to what I've heard lately, excuse me, let me just reposition myself, from various groups and individuals who are seeking an original path of the human family experience, Chaim, to life. For those who are wondering, I already made the blessing before I had this grape water. Some want to go on the path of Adam. Some might even seek the path of Seth. Many seek the path of Chanoch or Enoch. Some might even seek the path of Methuselah. Certainly those who are interested in the path of Noah. And how much more so, various individuals and even groups are interested in the path of Shem, the son of Noah, the primordial ancestor of all the Semitic peoples. Of course, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Israel. But there's one person that perhaps we've overlooked, and there's a universal prophecy that was transmitted to this human being, and therefore there's a universal instruction for all of us, if we wish to internalize. I'm talking about none other than Job, or Eeyov as he's known in Hebrew. Now, in fact, he bears the distinction of all the B'nai Noah to have the most chapters written about him, more than Noah, more than Adam, more than Seth, more than Methuselah. So there's something we perhaps have been overlooking. Now, most people are aware of the fact that he went through great sufferings and eventually the sufferings were taken away. But what I want to focus on with you, blessed souls, and I apologize that because the material is so intensely dense, I'm going to have to be looking down to reading from a wonderful book. It's called, and I heavily recommend anyone to get this book, it's called Data Sofrim. It's published by Moznaim Publication. The book could probably, in American dollars, would probably cost you about $25. Now, I'm not, in the prophecy, there will be some mentioning of issues that led to Job's suffering and his request for justice. But more importantly, in chapter 38 and 39 and 40, there's almost 100 verses, there's approximately 100 verses of direct prophecy that Prophet Job received from the Almighty. Or from our tradition, when you read in Scripture, from the 5 books of Moses, in the book of Judges, in the book of Kings, various prophets, where it said the Almighty spoke to, that is the prophetic experience. But to enrich this prophetic experience, we want to add the oral Torah tradition. So here we go. We're going to start with about 6 verses today and hopefully make it into a series, because for me to read out 100 verses and all the explanations, we'll be doing this till tomorrow morning. And there's time for everything in its proper time. So here we go. First, I just want to preface that I would strongly suggest that anyone, after learning of these prophecies with the oral Torah tradition, go back and learn chapters 1 through 37 as a preparation, so to speak, an after preparation. When you learn the depth and the richness of this prophecy given to Job, Eeyov, the oral Torah tradition. And it will become even a more profound experience. And hopefully we will see more and more human beings embracing the path of Job, although no one should have to go through the tremendous sufferings that Job went through, but rather should experience tremendous godly revelations that eventually he would experience in his lifetime. So here we go. And I'm just going to read the English translation. God then answered Job from the tempest and said, although the divine response comes only after those of human beings, there can be no comparison of their answer to the Almighty's. The Almighty's answer focuses directly on the problems of the human condition, which Job has raised, and on the changes needed in his opinion in order to correct what he sees as injustice. At the revelation of Sinai, the Creator had revealed specific truths about the human condition and man's place in the world. "You shall be special to me from all the peoples, for all the earth is mine." To learn more about that, go to the book of Exodus, chapter 19, verse 5. At creation, the Creator had given man authority over the lower life forms. To learn more about that, go to Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. And repeated so to Noah after the flood. To learn more about that, go to chapter 9, verse 2 in the book of Genesis. Job, only aware of the supremacy of man over lower life from his vantage point as a Ben Noah, felt that the human condition should be even greater. He felt that the Creator, as if, had denied man his due. God's answer to him here will be that he reevaluate man's standing, because after all, we human beings are one of many myriad creatures upon this blessed earth. Humankind, the human family experience at large, and Job in particular, despite his superior wisdom, are blind to what goes on in the world. How futile and foolish is it than for him to offer advice on how the world should run? And in the verse, part of the verse, it said that God then answered Job. From the juxtaposition, it seems that God's answer came only after Elihu had finished speaking, which is in the previous chapter, chapter 37. A perplexing silence ensued, and then the Creator appeared to Job. From the tempest, as it says in the verse, the Hebrew word "from" is spelled here uniquely, probably to hint that this was no ordinary prophecy. The heavens were not opened up for Job to see any celestial visions, but he only heard the roar of a storm. And within that storm, he heard a voice, which is the Creator conveying the message to him. This auditory phrase was only preliminary to actual visions seen later by later Israelite prophets such as Elijah. And from there, it's quoted in the book of Kings, book 1, chapter 19, verse 11. And lo, God was passing, and a great and mighty wind, but God was not in the wind. Chaim Lebracha, to life. Chapter 38, verse 2. Who is this who confounds advice with words without knowledge? Elucidating on who is this who confounds advice. Advice is a plan given in a situation where the proper course of action is unclear. Earlier, in the book of Job, the Satan, or the Satan, had accused Job of serving Creator only for his own personal benefit, and that he would blaspheme Creator if he were denied it. So the Creator gave the Satan, or the Satan, advice to shake Job from his complacency. The Job, again, his Hebrew name is Eeyov, responded in a very ambiguous way. He seemed to be both blaspheming and surrendering to the Creator in the same breath. Till this very day, his words are open to conflicting interpretations, almost as if he himself did not know what he really believed. Under such conditions, it was possible to either convict or vindicate Job. His case was thus left in limbo without resolution. Hence, Job had confounded God's advice to the Satan. Although the verses later on, in which we'll ask who are rhetorical questions, here it is meant as censure. Who has the audacity to speak ambiguously about Creator? Without knowledge, as it ends in the verse in chapter 30, verse 2, without knowledge of the real cause of his suffering. Knowledge refers to the exact and proper evaluation of things. Job or Eeyov's word may contain much wisdom and understanding, but they are lacking in such complete and clear knowledge of facts. He assumed that he was being punished for specific sins, which he denied ever doing because of lack of providence, while the fact was that he was suffering because of divine advice, an effort to transform his motivation to serve God from material benefits to spiritual growth. L'chaim, to life. Chapter 38, verse 3. Gird now your loins like a man. I shall ask you, and you will tell me. Now, why would Job be asked to gird his loins? This is usually an expression associated with preparing for physical battle. Job wasn't preparing for battle, nor was he being asked to prepare for battle. But the Creator's call to him now was to begin his life again. After the period of his trial now being over, Now is the time for Job to take account of what he has learned and make an honest soul searching. Such introspection demands as much inner powers as does a physical battle. In other words, Job is being shown the path of return to Teshuvah. And he was so meritorious that he was actually given prophecy to help him in this process. In the verse, at the end of the verse, I shall ask you and you will tell me, the Creator has no need to be told any answer from human beings. The intention then is that Job himself be confronted with answers to the following questions so that he come to a realization of man's status and obligations in this world. This would bring him to the consequent realization that he had erred in his demands of Creator, would then confess his error and firmly accept to change his beliefs, as is the obligation of the repentant. There really are no answers to the questions to follow because they are and will remain secrets with Creator, but that in itself is the answer to Job. Chapter 38, verse 4, where were you when I founded the earth? Tell me, or tell if you know understanding. Elucidating on where were you when I founded the earth, this does not refer to the physical creation, but to the foundation of the earth. This refers to the foundations of life on earth after creation, in which man was given a central role to fill the earth and master it. To learn more about that, go to the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 28. The question then is not where was Job personally, but where was mankind? And where has he been ever since? All those problems and injustices about which Job has complained are all of man and women's doing. So the injustice of the world, blessed souls, in this prophetic teaching, the inner dimension of the oral Torah tradition of Israel, is that we human beings create the problems, not the Creator. We must humble ourselves to accept this truth. Within extreme limits, God does not interfere in man's doings and women's doings, and is every man and woman's obligation within his or her capability to build a society where such injustices and problems do not exist. As things stand, without that divine intervention, at critical junctions, civilizations would utterly decay. In fact, we see from history, civilizations have decayed. There was not an adequate promotion of justice and mercy and kindness and brotherly love. It is thus the human being who despoils life for his or her own posterity. But on another level, this is indeed a personal question to Job. With his gifted spiritual talents and his vast financial assets, he could have brought about great improvements in society. But he devoted his life to simply amassing those assets and praying to Creator to protect them for him. I think there's an instruction here, blessed soul. There's some people who live just to preserve their financial assets and not to improve human being society. I'm not going to point fingers. It's for each one of us to ask ourselves, with the assets that we have, whether they be financial, spiritual, cognitive, or emotional, are we just preserving them for ourselves? Or are we sharing? Are we, so to speak, tithing our portions of our individual talents, blessed by the Almighty? Where was Job in relation to the earth's spiritual foundations? Where it says tell in the verse of this verse of prophecy, tell, the word using for telling denotes a firm tone. Job is requested to speak up clearly and state from where he drew the courage to complain about the divine order in the world. The conclusion of verse 4, if you know understanding denotes the ability to draw conclusions about the unknown from the known. This is expressed in the past tense, urging Job to look honestly into himself and to admit and confess that he lacks such understanding. Chapter 38, verse 5, who placed its measures that you should know? Who placed a measuring line upon it? Concerning the word who, many of the questions begin with who. The intention is to emphasize that human beings are incapable of understanding the divine logic. Placed its measures, each phenomenon in the world has unique attributes. Each living creature has its own distinct lifespan. Greatness, strength, toil, fear, joy, and the entire gamut of human emotions are distributed very unevenly among mankind, humankind, every man and woman. This question also borders on censure. How can Job assume to understand things which have no human logic were based upon a higher divine logic? And even those things which are within every man and woman's farthest reach can only be grasped by those few people who are blessed with extraordinary talents. Concerning the part of the verses that you should know, in the future tense, it must become clear to Job that he will never be able to understand and thus cannot complain. Concerning the end of this verse, who placed a measuring line upon it. This refers to the complaints raised by Job that life on earth is like an army for man, like a slave who aspires for shade. There you'd have to go back to the book of Job, chapter 7, verses 1 and 2. The Creator asks, who made this situation the norm? Who is responsible for the earth's being cursed? Who created a civilization in which one has to learn some trade to survive, and he who has not cannot buy his sustenance? Although on the surface the answer is human beings, the ultimate reasons for the phenomena are hidden in the Almighty Creator. The concluding verse for today's presentation, blessed souls, is, upon what were its foundations set, or who laid its cornerstone? On the verse it reads, upon what were its foundations set, what are the bases of life on earth, and what is life's purpose? Our tradition as Israelites has much to say about this, but Job could not have known much about it because he was a Ben Noah, and he did not interact with the children of Israel after they received the Torah. He only interacted with the children of Israel when they were enslaved in Egypt, when he stood silent when Paro was taking advice from three major advisors. Jethro, who ran from his life when he told Paro, do not oppress this people, for they are the blessed children of Abraham. Bilam, who came up with the advice of throwing the baby boys into the river, out and out infanticide. And Job did not protest, nor did he side with Bilam. So Job never got the opportunity, the golden opportunity, to learn the Torah of Israel after the giving of the Torah Mount Sinai. He might have interacted with the Levites who were not enslaved in Egypt. It's quite possible, since he was a royal advisor. But that's just something to think about. That's called a Maimer Musgar, a parenthetical verbal projection on my part for you to do a little bit more research on. Finally, who laid its cornerstone? The Psalms speak about the world's cornerstone, which you can learn more about by going to Psalms 118, verse 21. There it means great personalities and world spiritual leaders. It probably means the same thing here. It is also here refers to Job's complaint that the earth was given into the hand of the wicked, which you can learn more about by going to the book of Job, chapter 9, verse 24. It's very interesting, too, that the first Chabad Rebbe, Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, talked about that who runs the world? The wicked run the world. Those who are not open to the teachings of the future, which were transmitted to it in the past, of the human family experience, say the prophecies. So here we see that even Job recognizes, as some try to promote, that the Satan runs the world. We learn from the book of Job that the Satan is just one of a myriad of angels who was given a job and did a good job of afflicting Job. Pun intended, he did a good job of afflicting Job of Eeyov. He also appears, Satan also appears in the book of Zechariah. And of course, he infiltrated the Nachash Kadmoni, the primordial snake, who tricked Chava, Eve, the original woman, eventually tricked the original man, Adam, to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. God's question to Job is then, who appointed these world spiritual leaders and who supported these wicked ones to whom Job refers? A little bit of stinging commentary here. Was not Job himself one of Pharaoh's advisors to enslave an entire innocent people? it is a man who creates these injustices with his own free will, and all that can be said is the following. It's written in the book of Proverbs, chapter 19, verse 3, man's folly perverts his path, but upon God does he rage his heart. Now, I mentioned before that he was indifferent. So here, this contradicts what I said, so I guess I stand in error, and that's okay if I made a mistake. Part of Torah learning is that we can openly admit our mistake. So we can surmise that I know for a fact that Bilam gave the advice to throw the baby boys into the river. The astrologers had a vision, astrological perception that the savior of Israel, baby Moses, which will become the prophet Moses, the mighty Levite prophet, delivered the nation of Israel from Egypt, therefore to kill all the baby boys. Jethro protested, who eventually would become the father-in-law of Moses many years later. And I guess to soften as the middle view, I guess Job had advocated they become slaves, which is not killing them. At the same time, too, it's not saving them. So for that, he was given the punishments that he incurred, as you can read again at the beginning of this book. So there's a lot here, so you can meditate upon these things. But my main emphasis here is to share 6 verses from chapter 38. Hopefully, coming days we'll share more of this with the intent of evidencing to the entire human family experience, wherever you are, the 4 corners of the globe, that a person can do wrong, repent of their wrong, and ad kedei kach, until the very point that he or she can merit to having a prophetic experience or Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, which Elijah the prophet testified, I testify before heaven and earth that any man or woman, Israelite or Ben Noah, who wants to purify themselves, engage in acts of kindness and prayer and meditation, they will be zocha, they will merit to the divine spirit. And that's what we need to see ourselves, more and more human beings being vessels for taking in Ruach HaKodesh. And ultimately, it says in the book of Joel, chapter 3, verse 1, the pouring out of prophetic spirit on many, many different types of human beings. May this all transpire in a way of a havachad, one love, girl achad, one destiny, kolan for all of us. But darchi nom darki shalom, in a pleasant and peaceful way. Before I end this humble submission, to remind everyone and remind myself first, I've got to be good, you've got to be good, we've all got to be good. Because the teva tov, the heitiv, it's the nature of the good to do good, and the Creator is a source of our goodness, the source of all goodness, waits ever so patiently for us to activate that goodness. Let's go ahead and do it. Take care and have a blessed week.